Welcome to LoyalTV, where the telling of the greatest Oklahoma stories you've never heard brings us back to Muskogee to explore the legend of Bass Reeves.
True historians will tell you that there were more deputy marshals killed in the line of duty in Oklahoma than anywhere in the American West. There was almost no law enforcement in Indian Territory. It was desolate, and they'd taken a lot of the brunt of things during the Civil War. There was a lot of confusion. So as settlers came, crime was prevalent. And to get Indian Territory from Fort Smith and actually have law enforcement travel for days to try to find somebody in the remote areas of eastern Oklahoma, this is not flat land here. There was a lot of places for people to hide, and you had to be what I would call a detective to figure out. You had to talk to people. Have you seen so-and-so? Do you know that? Here we have an African American going in there and being a great success at doing this at a time when that didn't happen. He truly was an American hero, and one that has really blossomed in the last 20 years as far as knowledge of him. Bass Reeves was an African American born into slavery in Arkansas, and from all accounts fought in the Civil War. During that time, learned quite a skill of being a marksman, a gunman. He could shoot ambidextrously with both hands at the same level, and his shot became legendary. I'm sure that was part of the reason that Judge Parker and some of the deputies picked up on him. There's a lot of conjecture that he was the first black deputy marshal west of the Mississippi River, but no matter what, he was the first prominent U.S. deputy marshal as an African American. It was such an area that was just so lawless, and these lawmen were out there for weeks and months on their own trying to bring these outlaws back. And of course, that was quite a scene when the lawmen were bringing in these characters into Fort Smith. Town would come a buzz. Here comes Bass, bringing this group in, and let's see who he got this time. There was a huge demand for a railroad to enter Indian Territory. There was a small settlement near here called Agency. So they moved the depot into town, and within one day, Muskogee was born. First night Muskogee was born, it had a murder in it. The population was starting to explode in Indian Territory as more and more people were coming here. It just made logical sense to establish a federal court in the territory. The lawmen that were on Fort Smith, most of them, or a good portion of them, migrated over here to Muskogee. In 1897, a U.S. Marshal, Leo Bennett, he was assigned to be a marshal, and he selected his first group, and he picks a Justice League of the time period of lawmen, including Bud Ledbetter and Bass Reeves and many of them. We know Bass had been here to Muskogee on several occasions, we know that, but this has now become Bass's home. And he's not a young gentleman at this point in time, but he made his mark almost immediately here. He was serving in law enforcement out of the marshal's office from 1897 into statehood, so it was a 10-year period. 1907 was statehood. It was the end of an era for these lawmen, because they had been the primary law enforcement officers in Indian Territory for so long. After his service, he became a policeman, again 70 years old, with a cane, walking these streets, and he was a lawman here until he could no longer physically become a lawman. His death is interesting to me in the fact of the interest in him. I mean, here is an African American during the time of Jim Crow laws, during the time of a lot of racial prejudice, and here we are hearing reports in the newspaper. They would say legendary lawman Bass Reeves is being watched over and sick, and we didn't see things like that. And then his death was in newspapers, not only Muskogee, but throughout Indian Territory.
Now, if this sounds familiar, it's because it's believed that Bass Reeves could have been the real-life inspiration for the fabled hero of the Old West, the Lone Ranger.
Was Bass Reeves, African-American lawman, was the Lone Ranger story based on him. Of course, Bass rode a white horse. He was a master of disguises. He would trick people. That was really his nature. And that's, I think, some of the Lone Ranger element has come out of some of those stories. I think it's kind of a little far-fetched. And to me, it kind of takes away the element of who really Bass Reeves was. He was not a fictional character. This is true stuff, really, when we get into it. He was really a truly American hero. He spanned a really interesting period of time and fought racial prejudice. It was against a lot of odds, but he succeeded. We're very proud here in Muskogee to call him a Muskogee resident and really a hero of our community.
Join us next week in Tahlequah when we dive deep into the tale of the lost town that lies beneath Lake Tenkiller's crystal clear waters.